Morning everyone, it's a fresh, crisp autumnal morning and I find myself walking along a former railway line, the DVLR, as many of my trips and adventures start. We haven't done one of these for a while, have we? Train just departed. We're now at Shildon. There we are. There's Sheldon. Crossed a little. Well, walked along here. We're going. So we're going. There's a path. Right, there's a path behind me. We're going that way, but there is stuff the other way that's well worth going to have a look at. Not least these kind of coal state, the sort of coal. What are they called? Where they tip the coal out. Anyway, there's an incline, the coal gets tipped out, and there's more stuff that way, but we're going to walk this way. But also we're going to have to negotiate our way through a level crossing first, which we can do safely because no trains are running along here at the moment, as by the fact that there's fences here, so it's quite safe for me to film as we cross. Walking this way. If I close this, is it going to stay closed? No. So a nice short walk from the railway station, and finally I tell you what on earth we're doing here. So it's the first of a two-part rail natter. The first part we're going to be over there at the not in the. You can see the new bridge that's been brought up here from York, and a lovely refurbishment job, and some actual history to talk about the wonderful kind of goneless bridge. Well, I could talk about that for hours, but we're not going to. No, behind that is New Hall. That's part one. Part two, which will be in a week or two, will be about the old shed, the old new building up at Shildon, and what they've done with the collection in there, and the changes they made in there, and also looking at things like APT. So we've got some fun ahead of us today. Without further ado, everyone, as we've got the building we're not going to be looking at in the background, but it's a Locomotion episode. Without further ado, everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. Welcome to New Hall. This is the fantastic new building at Locomotion up at Sheldon, part of the Railway Museum, part of the National Railway Museum. This room is brilliant. This hall, this gallery is brilliant. I'll hopefully talk more at the end about the aesthetic of the feel of the place, which I like, which I think is fantastic. but I also, it's laid out in a series of tracks. So you have a track here, Origins in Coal, which is about the origins of freight in this area, but more broadly, Anything Anywhere, which is about how much the railways decided they could carry everything, Servicing the System, which is how you keep the railway system moving. We have Industrial Railways, which kind of does what it says on the tin, Built in Shildon, so kind of tying this into what happened at Shildon, the story at Shildon. Related to coal, but much more. And then Freight Future, so talking about what the railways are doing now and a little bit about what they might be doing in the future, and sort of looking at what the future might hold by looking at moments in advancement of the railway in the more recent past. This room is brilliant, and we're going to go through each of those roads with one of my standard talking, gabbing head, pointing at things sessions for each of the roads, because this room is brilliant, and I cannot wait to talk to you about it. So we start the story with the first track, Origins in Coal, and the first vehicle here, because this is a building. What's good? I'm sure I'll pick this up as we go through, as I stand next to one of the Hetton Colliery locomotives that's here, glorious. It's called Lion, as so many locomotives ended up being called. And what's glorious about this shed, this building, is that it whilst it is a collection of rolling stock items, it does a much better job of telling the wider story. I mean, firstly, it actually threads a narrative, which basically none of the rest of the museum campus does yet. And we'll get to why this is a good indicator of the future, because it is telling that story really well. But what's really nice is it tells the story, it tells that bigger social story, it tells the story of, it refers to the reason why things were the shape they are, it does refer to infrastructure, as we'll get to momentarily. It weaves that yarn, it creates, it builds that story in a way that really hasn't been done yet elsewhere. And admittedly, we're starting the story with this lot. We're starting the story at the start of the locomotive railway era. Well, that's kind of understandable. We are in a museum called Locomotion, after all. But what's quite nice here, we have a lovely Sheldon wagon. The wagons that kicked, well, they didn't kick it all off, but these were arriving far earlier than any locomotives were, and in their hundreds, which is really very nice. So this is Origins in Coal. This tells the story of or kind of indicates the early part of why the railways were coming about and what they were doing, and coal movement was a major part of what railways were doing, what wagon ways were doing. I also want to talk about, so this whole building, I'll say this now, I might well say it again later, this whole building, as well as doing a really nice job of telling that story, this whole building is sort of set up, it has a bit of an art gallery feel to it in a way that I quite like. Firstly, there's a new building. It's built such that it's sterile air, like it's not sterile. They can, well, yes, basically they can do the kind of atmospheric management, climate control to maximise the life of the exhibits, of the collection. But also there's these lovely little art pieces placed around the outside, which I think is really nice. Just painting that picture. The images themselves are very impressive, also very beautiful. So here we have a Q7, which is, despite being one of the most, all very nicely interpreted, by the way. The interpretation is really good in here. Like it's fab. But despite being one of the most powerful locomotives originally built by the North Eastern Railway, Q7s had to operate in pairs to haul coal trains around up to the ironwork. Actually, no, not coal, ore. They were hauling ore. No wonder, because ore weighs an absolute ton. So these are here. They're part of the story, and we have a mineral hopper here from the interwar years, I think, this one, but it's missing its plate steel. It's just the skeleton, which is quite interesting. But then next to it we have a early 1900s 20-ton, NER 20-ton coal hopper, of which there were lots and lots of these about. Again, this one, interestingly, built in Sheldon, and that's as will come about. The story, Sheldon is wonderfully weaved through here, through this story, very, very nicely. Actually, I'm going to check if the let's say this one's made in Motherwell, so this doesn't have a Sheldon connection. But as we go this way, I have to be careful because there's a load of school groups in here, so I have to be careful about how I navigate. So 20-ton coal wagon. Coal wasn't the only side effect of the coal industry, and then obviously as the fuel industry, the energy industry as we might call it, started moving other things around, you needed tank wagons, and on this row is the first one of those. This is the first tank wagon, the oldest surviving tank wagon. It's not the first, it's the oldest surviving tank wagon. It looks pretty shonky in terms of how it's been put together. They've like it's sat on beams. They've put metal straps and like steel cables to hold it down. It's quite interesting. Possibly the most beautiful object on this row, though, is look at this Northeastern Electric locomotive with its pantograph at the top. What is this? 1903 or 1905? Is it? I'm about to look at the interpretation. Yeah, 1905. This is the S1, Electric Shunter 1. Northeastern Railway number 1, electric number 1, and it's gorgeous, just gorgeous. It's got this lovely number 1 here, marvelous, and it just looks fab, and it's electric, and for very similar reasons to why electric locomotives were popping up in the US a little earlier, frankly, was because of visibility through struggling with the tunnels on bits of railway. They thought, you know what, maybe electric's not a bad idea here. And you got this lovely raised cab that you could sit above. Throughout all these, the narrative is really nicely weaved through all of these. So, so that was kind of origins in coal, and the story of coal and what coal was implying, and in sort of the way that coal influenced the initial journey of the modern railways on this side of the country, because coal was very much king over here, up here, different to the way the railways were developing on the other side of the country. Although obviously got plenty of coal traffic as well, but particularly up in the northeast, coal was king. The next track, what's it going to be? And so the next section, which is not to do with the snowplow, it's to do with this thing behind me, this enormous locomotive. It's a Class G2, very unpopular, called the Super D. It's what is it? It's O. There's the O. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. O40, and it's very unpopular. What's quite nice, they talk about the unpopularity with the staff, the drivers and firemen of the loco, but it's a classic sort of goods locomotive. So why not start the section? By the way, anything everywhere. This section, anything everywhere. This is about us as a railway moving all manner of things around and how we did it. And an example of a very fetching looking green vehicle here, very nice. By the way, they have each of the sort of aisles has a sort of an accessible sort of interpretation panel with video, with someone doing some nice signing down here, and then also there's an induction loop thing that you can with the story, and it kind of tells the broader story of what this is about, the expansion, the continuing expansion of the story. I know someone who's going to have something to say. Thank you. Yeah, there's a special cattle van built by BR here, 1951. Thank you, sir. Yeah, here we are. Lovely, kind of showing that we move livestock in from livestock to things that shoot people. Because here, yeah, it's a massive flat wagon with a little early tank on it, which is quite nice. Just showing the range of things. This is a war flat. This is showing the range of things that were transported around. A war flat from the western region. We've got a W on it. So GWR, I say Western region. This is painted in, looks like it's painted in BR colours, but it's a war flat, so it's from before that. From the war flat to the well troll, to the well wagon, which we've got behind us here. A well wagon with this sort of moving van thing that a horse would haul around on top of it as well, giving an idea of sort of early. It's a ro-ro. We have a ro-ro here. But again, it's talking about the different ways that goods were moved around. But didn't they found an LNER one of these in was it in Ghent, or was it in France, or the Netherlands recently? I can't remember. Anyway, well wagon. Lots of well wagons around. 20-ton well wagon. Next, then the classic behind me again. I'm spinning around. Don't worry, I'm doing B-rolls, so this will be all a bit neater. Behind me here, it's a nice three-plank wagon. There, three-plank wagon, which carried everything. You just put stuff in it, then probably hauled a tarpaulin over the top, and then moved it around. They often had a bar over the top as well. Or they had a bar that was to one side that you'd sway over to put the tarp over the top to protect what goods you had. And then they've got a little light brake van here. This little tiny wee brake van. What is the little 10-ton jobbo here? Looking very fetching. So that is anything everywhere. Talking about the whole point of that, again, that aisle there, and we'll talk about the one next to us as well. Don't worry about that thing. That aisle talking about how the railways very rapidly were moving much more than coal. They were moving everything. It just became utterly intrinsic to the entire human logistics of certainly the British Empire, but also for much of the rest of the world as well, for better or worse. Anything everywhere. So we come to servicing the system, the track that possibly is my favourite one. We start with an enormous snowplow, but an older one here with its very fetching angle of attack at the plough at the front here. NER design, so early part of the last century. Oh, in fact, no, I lie. 1891, so latter part of the previous century. It's just been very nicely looked after. It's had a very nice job tidying and looking after this one, which is nice for reasons that are at the other end in a second, which I look forward to pointing out. Anyway, snowplow. But this whole section is about looking after the railway, and the fun thing is that that's not just physical smashing up, it's also looking at it. And what's quite nice is that aerolite, there's aerolite. Aerolite's back here. Aerolite was used for nipping around the network as a bit of an inspection runabout. So it pulled inspection saloons around the Northeastern Railways network. So you have to inspect the railway to keep it running. So it's quite nice that that's here for that reason. Hello, cow. Then the next we have is the crane and jib runner here from 1850. 1850. This one's Great Northern Railway. GNR. Very nice. Here it's behind it. Look, it's very like GNR on there as well. So there is a crane for lifting up things that have fallen over, or lifting up things that are heavy that need to be moved around. It's the oldest rail-mounted crane in the world. A specialist vehicle built to move things too heavy for teams of men to lift. Well, yeah, quite. Here it is, looking glorious. The B-roll, I'm sure, will be coming up. But then we have another crane in a second, and this one's straight. This one is literally the eye of the engine one. There it is, the one that falls over in the snow. Is it in the snow? I can't remember. But the elephants come to the rescue, of course. Alice and her friends come to the rescue. Here's it's the Wicken trolley. It's the Wicken trolley. Look at this Wicken trolley. But not only the Wicken trolley, because there's also a couple of velocipedes. Look, 2 little velocipedes here. Terrific for getting around on the railway. Just good stuff. Also, something else that's great here is an old NRM logo, which is very snazzy in there, which return with a V, or in this case a U question mark. Will make sense in the B-roll. Wickham trolley, St Trinian's type situation. Let's have a closer look at this. Fantastic. I'm old and fragile. Do not touch me. Yeah, quite reasonably. But I would love to have one of those to ride around. Not very good for capacity. Look at this. Also, everything about the first of this has been beautifully refurbished, like conserved. Very, very nice. It's proper kettle sat on a flatbed with the crane next to it. Just glorious. This one. So this is not quite 100 years older than the other one, but this is 1935, so it's interwar, and it just looks glorious. Look at all that red and black. It's been very nicely looked after. But one of my favourite objects in here, because I'm a P-way engineer, is the tamper. We have an old Matisse tamper, an imported Matisse tamper here, with Leyland diesel sort of mounted engine, transverse mounted engine here, all manner of buttons and knobs and dials. But there, this is the tamper. It is a tamper. There, it's tamper tines, marvelous. Look at it. Look at it, it's brilliant. So you've got the tamper tines that go down, to consolidate the ballast underneath and make sure the ballast goes underneath, it gets rid of all the voids, and then you support your sleepers. You've got the warnings, it's all BR-ified warning siren and stuff, because this thing was getting used until remarkably late. This is 40s tech, by the way. This is old. The reason it's got an engine on it from a tractor is because from a 40s tractor is because that's when it's from. Chief Civil Engineer, North Eastern Region, Hull District. You know. But this is the start of, if we go over to the Matisse plate, this is actually built under license here, actually, forgive me, imported, the license is imported from the Swiss, but we did build it here, which is interesting. There we go, machine number 48573 with the fantastic Matisse logo here. Terrific, absolutely love that. Tamper, early tamper. They look a little bit more complicated than this now. At some point I'll go out on a trip for a tamper and show you one in action. But what's quite nice is that this whole that bookended at each side of this row, it's another snowplow, and we're going to go and have a look at the spiky end of the snowplow. If I go over here, it's the snowplow. The much spikier, scary-looking snowplow at the other than the one at the other, the more soft-looking wooden one at the other end. Both of them built on tenders, although maybe the other one was custom built. This one isn't. This was built on the back of an old steam loco tender because it's robust and can be bashed about, and dates from the early BR years, possibly to a pattern from an NER design. So this is a very old design, but these are the same as the ones that are still running around today, although this one obviously retired and gifted to the museum by Network Rail. It looks fab though. I've seen these whizzing around at pace. What's also great is you can see the gauge, the little gauge ring at the top to check gauge. Anyway, I digress, there we go. That is how you keep the railway moving, keep things going, keep servicing. There are these little thin alleyways for access for staff, but not for us punters. So you can sort of see between. We've got another aisle, another track to walk down, and what will this one be about? So for this next road, we start in reverse actually. It's the only one where you want to kind of go, actually no it's not, it's the second, there's two that you want to go backwards in, and this is one of them. We start with an adapted petrol shunter. The First World War these things were popping up, but narrow gauge basically on the front on temporary railways, and also for logistics in the rear. These were obvious. There's an obvious need for these on industrial railways and on kind of in sidings and things, but particularly industrial railways. And so Simplex started building them and making them, selling them all over the place. And so they kind of quickly gained popularity. This, by the way, this is industrial railways. We're talking about industrial railways. This row is about so we've had this sequence, this really nice sequence. So we started with the railways, particularly in this area. First of all, coal and the way that coal, by the way, with this thing behind me, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Coal driving the way the railways developed here, then byproducts of coal, then how the railways expanded into carrying everything is the next road very nicely, then how we needed to look after that railway is the row following. This track is a bit how is really kind of going into the story of how the railways went from being everything to then realising what it was very good at and then specialising as it stepped up in the volume of its, really started becoming very efficient, rather than just forced by numbers and the fact there was no competition. At this point, industrial railways were starting to have to compete very significantly with road, and so they needed to get good. So behind us here is a I think 14-ton tank wagon. National Fuels behind me. This thing, it's a bit of an advance on the one that we saw on the first track, isn't it? It's somewhat more custom built, but these things, just so many of these moving around across the rail network. This one's from the 50s, kind of ubiquitous on many a Hornby model railway bought as a cheap thing. Next we have, so this is a clay hood wagon, this thing, which I'll just stand a bit further back from so you can see it, this thing, China clay. So this is moving powdered goods, specialist powdered goods, industrial goods, were moved around the country at enormous scale. But here is an older wagon. I quite like also that there's a mixture of stuff. There's things that have been looked after very beautifully in here and refurbished to look brand new, and other things refurbished to, or not refurbished, just preserved, which is quite nice. I like the fact there's that mixture. So China clay, industrial railways, but also being moved around the country as part of bulk trains. So this kind of not always the case that you had trains that just only carried one thing. Coal, for sure, but even then, there were mixtures, but certainly for other goods, it was generally mixed goods. Often, bulk trains that just carried one thing weren't necessarily completely as normal as you might expect if you play Transport Fever 2. Behind me it's a poop train. It's a poop wagon. It's full of poop. This is the City of Sheffield Sewage Disposal Department tipper wagon. It's a sewage tipper, and it looks really old. It looks like one of those Shildon things from earlier, but actually it's not. It was built in the 60s, but it's got it's very basic. I suppose you don't care about complexity. You want simplicity if you've got to clean the poop off it regularly. But this thing would make its way from Sheffield to Rotherham, where the poop would get dumped. And so, sorry Rotherham, but the glories, and now we incinerate it, which is better. No. Anyway, So we had the kind of the plank wagon earlier. Well, now we're getting into wagons that are carrying powders, but better, doing a far better job of it. This is a press flow. These things, particularly after the Second World War, where we had to rebuild the whole country, we needed a lot of cement for concrete. This thing carried bulk powders, but cement powder around far more effectively than in the past, where it had been in paper bags and stacked up manually within just any old kind of covered wagon. This thing pumped in and then pumped out with compressed air much more quickly, much more rapidly, much more volume, allowing the country to kind of be rebuilt. And so you see from the comparison to, working our way up from, we're seeing how these things developed, how we're getting the development, and nothing more embodies that really than the 100-ton tank wagon behind me. That is a serious advance on the little 14-ton doodad further on the other side. This thing, well, it's obvious, right, why this makes sense, even if it's maybe evil that we're moving this much fossil fuel around. But if you have, rather than having all the the wheels, the kit, all the bits and pieces here, the bogies are heavy, all this kit, but like for 1,400, six or seven of those wagons for one of these. You can see that this is much lighter, so you're carrying a lot more product for a lot less, dead weight, a lot less tear weight, which is good. So you get more stuff, but it doesn't mean you're moving these things around, and they're a bit scary with a lot of scary explosives in them. Summit Tunnel fire, look that up. Anyway. The 1970s, this is when things started really accelerating and changing in terms of how we were moving these bulk goods around. This thing is still quite old looking compared to some of the modern ones that you see. It definitely has, it's got that sort of modern-ish vibe to it, not helped by the Phillips Petroleum branding on the side, making it look particularly of an era. But 100-ton tank wagon, pretty iconic. And then we talk about industrial railways. Well, a lot of the industrial railways around the UK were being run by ICI, by Imperial Chemical Industries. Anyway, yeah, Imperial and Chemical and Industrial it was. ICI, and here is probably a lime wagon. We'll find out in the interpretation in a second. But you see, it's a big hopper thing. Again, very different to the China clay wagon, the wooden thing at the far end. You sort of see the difference in scale. Needed for fueling the chemical industry here. It's used in all sorts of products by ICI. This thing is from the 50s. So actually, it's not that modern. But what's quite nice it's another nice bookend is that we have a nice sort of Rolls-Royce powered Sentinel shunter at this end, diesel shunter at this end. This thing won an Industrial Design Award, in fact, which, okay. Well, I suppose it probably looked a little tidier than the Gronks moving around, the Class 08s rattling around all over the place. But a bit of a contrast to the petrol thing at the far end. You can sort of see. So you get this story. So this one in reverse to the other ones that we've done. You get this story, the story of moving industrial products around. As part of supply chain processes. I love the fact this story is being told like this. It's great. But now we have to talk about this thing behind me. Mm-hmm. So the second last of our roads that I want to talk about is made in Sheldon. Should I say built in Sheldon? This locomotive wasn't built in Sheldon, but it is a Class 31. And it's somewhat typical of the sorts of vehicles that were being built, and kind of the era of vehicles we're going to see mostly, although not entirely, are. This is built by Brush Traction in Loughborough. This is really about for the most part, about the merry-go-round wagons. So it's an important part of Sheldon Wagon Works' story, and it's kind of, for many people around here, still a living memory. So locomotives of this vintage were hauling around lots of things of this vintage, particularly as we picked into the modern central electricity generating board era of needing enormous volumes of coal. Now what's fun is the one behind me, Wagon 350000, it's an HAA wagon. This is the prototype. This is the prototype 32-ton coal wagon. So if you want to compare coal wagons of the chaldrons at the far end, it's funny how these things look quite chaldrony in their, they've got two axles. They have a funny angled shape. There is something a bit chaldrony about them, which is kind of fun. So these this was 1964 as part of the development of the overall system, because it was very much a system of getting coal at enormous volume into the massive the power generating, the Air Valley or electric, Electric Valley, further south into the East Midlands. These things were part of these things would go, they would never stop. They were called merry-go-round because they never stopped. So the MGR trains, the locomotives, whether they were a pair of 20s or whether it was, it was a 47 or whatever it happened to be pulling it around, would never stop. They were electrically controlled. They would go at half a mile an hour, and these things would just go through the power station, empty their stuff, and keep going. So that's why you had these loops in a way that you didn't in the past need the big loops. So that if you look at the map of these power stations, you'd see they have a loop, because the train would literally run around and then make its way back, fill up, come back, and it would just do that all day. It would just, non-stop, would just be doing that all day. They'd get filled up on the move, they would empty on the move, and this is the prototype that tested the concept. And here is so this is 1977, this one was built. This is a more modern looking version of the thing. Actually, interesting, it's worth saying, although all of the wagons were built in Shildon, this prototype was built in Darlow, so in Darlington, just a skip down the road. This is so this is not an MGR wagon, but it follows much a very similar design, an HEA rather than an HAA. This was for moving coal elsewhere, so not just for the merry-go-round, but for coal going for other uses elsewhere, domestic and business markets, as it were. And yeah, this thing disappeared. Well, it's EWS, so you can see pretty recently. These things were moving coal around in these two-axle wagons until pretty damn recently. Something a little bit different, but just to show that other things were being built at Shildon, and actually refers to the fact that lots of the works here were repurposed during the war, as well as lots of military stuff. This is a Lomac wagon that's got a very nice GNR tender in it. I wonder what this belongs to. What wagon, what loco is hiding somewhere that's got this in the back? Anyway, there's another one of the interpretation boards, by the way, that's very nice. Yeah, built in, this one is from 1944, built in Shildon. Now, we also have to talk, so there's another Shildon wagon of a vintage that it's a bit more recent than that. This is a Sea Cow 40-ton ballast hopper from 1973. This thing, well, we still use a similar design to this. This is a ballast wagon. So this is actually kind of similar to the road on how do we maintain the railways. Fill this with ballast, and it has 3 outlets for ballast. So this one it builds up the ballast shoulder. There's one in the middle that drops it into the beds, so into the forefoot, and then another like this on the other side for the shoulder. And then it would be followed by a plough or a regulator, a ballast regulator to shape it into the right shape. Well, actually, later, first of all, you'd have a tamper come through a couple of times to tamp the track into the right geometry, and then the regulator would come to make sure the ballast profile was set correctly. But there's a nice picture of them in action. Oh, lovely. B-roll will help with that. Again, built in Shildon. Yeah. The end of that story is another familiar vehicle, and this one's fun because it's not. The first one's painted grey, whereas this one uses galvanised steel and isn't painted but other than the red frame. Because this is the last one that was built. So the first built in '64, the last was built in 1982 as part of, well, to be honest, the demise of Shildon Works, really. And they didn't need new MGR, apart from the ones that we'd flung in trees when they get derailed. True story, MGR wagons ending up in trees. This is the last one that was built. Here it is, the last wagon built in Shildon, looking pretty much exactly as it was as it was kind of retired. So yeah, this is, what is this? An HDA wagon, so the prototype's an HAA, we saw the HEA, well this is an HDA, so they're all similar, but this is again specifically an MGR, whereas the EWS one is for more generic purposes. But yeah, this is the last of the Shildon built, well, the last of any of the MGR wagons, but this is the last Shildon built wagon after 20 years of them of these things getting kicked out. I wonder if it's going to tell us how many were built in total. No, but a lot is the answer. And again, from about 2010, these were disappearing. Kind of a sad story, but also progress for the railways. So there's two. That's two very similar looking wagons at each end, with the 31 at the far end, giving you a bit of a feel for this. It's quite nice. This one's particularly nice because it kind of has a bit of a sense of the overall train. Actually, it's quite nice. I like that one. So built in Shildon. So the last of our roads, again, it's in reverse this time, so we're working our way back towards the doors. By the way, it's nice, there's the facilities here, there's the loos and a bit of space, and it's all accessible. Again, a bit of an art gallery feel to it, which I think is quite nice. There's a bit of it's quiet in here, apart from there's loads of school kids. There's a nice presence. I'll talk about that at the end of the episode when we round off, but while I run for my train, let's talk about this. So we have a more standard, 2-axle mineral wagon here. It's a kind of a sort of standard 12-ton wagon, of which there were, 700,000 or something, like certainly 500,000 of them out and about on the network, hauling coal for all manner of private operators. These private mineral wagons were everywhere. And they were a nightmare because they had loads of different standards, which is where BR had to step in and come up with the wonderful 16-ton wind cutter, which kind of attempted to standardise all these. And these became pretty ubiquitous pretty quickly, mass built at scale. These ones built at Teesside Bridge and Engineering Company, which is kind of funny. The wind cutters there in nice and grey. I've got a nice collection of Hornby ones of these. As we've started changing the way, so it's nice. This road kind of closes things out quite neatly. This is kind of freight futures. This is talking about what's the future, but rounding off the coal story really. So you've got the mineral wagons that had huge amounts of coal. We've got the wind cutters that had huge amounts of coal, but fewer of those wagons needed because we were getting a bit better at how we move them around. Although basically those two are the same design, even though there's slightly more capacity in the wind cutter. Then we have an austerity, Juno here, an austerity miles away, kind of summing up, what we thought we were going to be moving things around. This is a 40s steam loco that ended up operating, well, this one for 10 years, but these overall were operating for they're supposed to be a couple of years and they ended up working for 40. True British style. Nothing we make is ever temporary. It's always permanent. Talking of which, a Class 08 shunter to the grog here, which is very much like, just a quick and cheap and nasty design, of which they're still shunting today. They are still operating. This one disappeared out in 1984. It's got the anemic line at the top there. But these things ubiquitous and kind of, spanned this period really. As a very nice bit of picture behind of actually some very nice liveried wagons there, because this is the weird 1950s era and actually early 60s era when we were starting to have unified branding and slight modernised branding, but we hadn't reached rebranding. We hadn't reached the early 60s or the 65 rebrand. Talking of which, is a speed freight container on a conflat wagon here. And this is, okay, so we don't have the Freightliner kit up here, which is a bit of a shame because it'd be nice to have had a road for Freightliner itself, but this road kind of, the interpretation panel talks about Freightliner, and so too does the interpretation panel for this wagon itself, so the blue one for the whole road, and then this one for the wagon. This is an early example of containerization, so this thing can be taken out, swapped out. It's got the speed freight, which I think is the early 60s attempts to unify the freight brand style before we went into the double arrow era. So that's kind of indicating, it's a hint of the future which went into intermodal, which is why it's nice that we've then got behind us got proper Freightliner intermodal train whizzing along on a very nice curve here. The last thing I want to talk about though is also the last wagon in the room, and it kind of summarises the story really, which is we started with the Chaldron wagon from Hetton Colliery. This also kind of nice because this is a York built 104-ton coal wagon, coal hopper wagon. This thing is what coal was being carried around in towards the end of its life on the railways. We don't move coal around much at all by rail. In fact, the last coal trains, we switched off the last coal power stations, last major coal generating stations very recently, in fact, because a whole bunch of threads went up about them. And here is the wagon. And there's kind of a bit of a, I said 104, it's 102, a bit of a ton wagon, that is, a bit of a melancholic end, partly in the skills lost at Shildon for manufacturing these things again, and also in York, because Thrall, one of the last things that came out of York were these wagons before York's works was closed as well. So the demise of industry, and not necessarily always a good thing. Coal, sure, good that ends, but the industry associated with it could have and should have been repurposed, and was not, because it was easy to just say you're out, you're off the case, folks. But here is that wagon, the last wagon, and it kind of neatly bookends the whole story. For me, hopefully, going through all these allows me to explain why I think this new building it points in the direction the museum needs to go, which is telling a story that's rich but also it is a story. There's this, it doesn't. The museum does not tell the story yet in York, but that's kind of the point of the transformation program. So refer back to previous episodes where we spoke to Charlotte about that. I'm going to run for my train. And off I hopped. Everyone, thanks for joining this one. As you might be able to tell, it was filmed way back in like late October, I think, last year. And it's taken me this long to actually have the, oh no, I've not got anything to do impetus to pull the episode together. Yes, firstly, you can, of course, come and see me at another museum talking about things except facing towards the future on the 10th of September. It'd be a joy to have you along to that. It's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Wednesday the 10th of September. The link there for you to buy tickets, book tickets. I can't remember what they're not much. It's cheap. Come along. The other thing, of course, is this would not be possible. Episodes like this chaos, not possible without you lovely Patreon supporters, the £5 and above tier Patreon supporters. Thank you for supporting me. There will be bonus content related to this episode a little bit later. What I actually do tonight, well, you have to be a Patreon supporter to find out. I suspect you'll get some interesting little sneak peeks as to what I've been up to this week, because it's been mild chaos. Anyway, without further ado, it only remains for me to say, take great care of yourselves, have a good evening, and I will catch you next week. Cheerio, everyone. Cheerio.